Vietnam used to be so wealthy that they stood among Asia's very best. I bet you don't believe it. This is the story of rise and fall of both culture and economy across more than 4,000 years of Viet civilization. A nation that prospered more than once, then had to restart from zero again and again. Stay with us for the next 15 minutes. You'll be surprised by what we reveal. Ready? 3, 2, 1, let's go. Let us begin our journey. Thousands of years ago, the ancient Vietnamese began to settle on this land. At the first light of beginning, the ancient Vietnamese, journeying out of Africa, set foot in East Asia and northern Vietnam very early. Humans still hunted and gathered, yet the earliest sparks of invention had already appeared. Phong Nguyen cultural emerged around 2000 to 1500 BC. Its pottery was exquisitely crafted, on par with the Halaf culture of Mesopotamia. Elsewhere in Southeast Asia, a comparable level would not appear until 300 BC in Thailand. The Vun Lang O Lac era blossomed, with bustling settlements strung along the great rivers. People built stilt houses, rising above floodwaters and safe from wild beasts. Children grew up without fear of survival or war. The wet rice civilization created a surplus of food. From that surplus came time and hands for culture to flourish and for science and craft to advance. Dong Son bronze drums were the pinnacle of metalworking, mirrors of a brilliant Vietnamese civilization, they serving the faith of an entire people, with the sun at the center of their world.
The fine detail and high aesthetics of the Dong Son bronze drums reveal more than metallurgical mastery. They speak of material surplus and a flourishing of arts and culture in an ancient society. Compared with civilizations to the west, Mesopotamia, the Greco-Roman world, and Shangzhou, China, we can see a wide gap in refinement and detail.
The wealth of an ancient civilization rose from its harvests. When agriculture flourished, it created space for culture to grow. Life bound to rivers and waterways may explain the newly unearthed Dong Son boat-shaped burials, graves stocked with finely crafted tools and weapons. Speaking of arms, the warriors of this age carried more distinctive weapons and fought in more distinctive ways. They fielded warriors armed with finely wrought bronze gear, as well as archers wielding poison-tipped arrows and levy troops drawn from the common folk. The Aulak crossbow, a state famed for its own advanced crossbow craft. These were the weapons that once defeated the elite invasion forces of Qin Shi Huang. Notably, the Qin Empire's own armies were famed for their crossbow technology, among the most advanced of their age. They first succeeded, liberating and restoring vast lands, seizing the entire southern part of what is now China. For enduring security, they built fortifications with a distinctive spiral design, walls that wound like a shell to slow the enemy and buy precious time. Alas, every golden age must end. A military defeat brought the rule of the Vun Lang state to a close.
In the Aulak period, statecraft in Vietnam moved to a truly strategic level. Ko Loa Citadel, with its 3 spiral rings of walls, is clear proof of advanced engineering and military thinking. Each wall was a separate layer of defense. If the enemy broke through the outer ring, they would be trapped and worn down inside the inner ones. In modern terms, it was a defense-in-depth system, a military concept that wouldn't become widely known in the world until many centuries later. Ancient Vietnamese chose to turn inward to protect, rather than reach outward to conquer. The wet rice civilization brought stability and abundant harvests, so society naturally leaned toward preservation instead of expansion. While many warrior civilizations were born out of scarcity, the Vietnamese developed a defensive strength, steady, enduring, and highly adaptable.
Historical upheavals ushered in a long chapter of northern rule. As a colony, Vietnam's wealth dried up. Its natural resources were claimed by the northern rulers. Vietnamese people were forced into servitude, an unpaid workforce driving the extraction of those riches. The evidence of a once radiant civilization was put to the torch. The northern regime drew deep from Vietnam's riches and, to steady its rule, denied the achievements of the Vietnamese past. Step by step, the people were pressed into northern customs, struggling simply to survive, but not everyone bowed to it. Heroes rose to reclaim independence, and the first to triumph were two women. A queen stood forth, a direct challenge to the conquerors. They first succeeded, liberating and restoring vast lands, but the tide did not hold. China struck back, swift and strong. At a grievous cost, the Han armies crushed the resistance of the Trung sisters. Yet the hero's story did not end. They left a legacy that kindled future wars of resistance. Yes, legends never die. The legacies stay on. After the first queen's sacrifice, new heroes rose to win Vietnam's independence. Hero followed hero. And finally, after 1,000 years of never-ending resistance, Vietnam finally won independence, and the country returned to an age of prosperity.
I would say Vietnam's period of northern domination is one of the most remarkable chapters in all of Asian history. For over 1,000 years, this land was under the direct influence of Chinese dynasties, a vast civilization with enormous assimilating power. Yet the Vietnamese still kept their own identity. They didn't just survive, they turned that experience into a deeper and stronger sense of nationhood. Where many other peoples were completely absorbed under imperial rule, the Vietnamese went in the opposite direction. They took what was useful from China and then Vietnamized it. So when Vietnam finally emerged from that influence, it did not become a copy of the North, but a culture uniquely its own. A blend of adoption and resistance, flexible yet unshakable.
From the Li dynasty onward, Buddhism was regarded as the state religion. Iconic Buddhist works rose across the land, symbols of faith and of a flourishing era. The sheer scale of the pagodas became a symbol of Vietnam's economic stature and national strength. Trade flourished, for Vietnam had become the transshipment port between East Asia and the West. Thung Long, the imperial capital, grew into the region's largest trading hub. The Van Dun seaport was always bustling, foreign merchants' ships coming and going in a constant rush. Under the Li dynasty, the chief export was celadon glazed ceramics. In return, foreign merchants who came to trade would present rare treasures from their own lands. When the open-pit gold mines along the northern frontier were worked, Li officials often hired low-cost laborers from China. With such abundant resources by the Tran era, the pearl, the rhino horn, the gold and silver became Vietnam exotic resources. This helps explain why, under the Li, gold-adorned garments became commonplace, worn not only by officials but by ordinary people as well.
By the time of the Li and Tran dynasties, the game had turned in Vietnam's favor. After more than 1,000 years of defense, Dai Viet entered the middle game of initiative. This was the height of strategic brilliance, a time when the Vietnamese fought, built, and defined their national identity all at once. Economically, Dai Viet during this era was one of the wealthiest nations in the region. Gold, silver, and copper mines, once exploited under Chinese rule, now became startup capital controlled by the Vietnamese themselves. Freed from the drain of resources, the country saw rapid growth in handicrafts, trade, and military strength. Geographically, 13th and 14th century, Dai Viet played a role similar to modern-day Singapore, positioned on the major trade routes linking China, Southeast Asia, and the Indian Ocean. While Singapore was still unknown at that time, Dai Viet was already a vital transit hub for international merchants. And if Dubai today uses oil as leverage to build a global trading center, then 13th century, Dai Viet did the same with gold, rice, and craftsmanship. That powerful combination of resources, geography, and strategic vision made Dai Viet under the Lai and Tran dynasties a kind of medieval Dubai, wealthy, self-reliant, and flourishing in both material prosperity and spiritual vitality.
Selecting talent was vital to the Tran military strength. Under their rule, Mongjiang warships ranked among the most advanced weapons of the age, helping secure 3 resounding victories over the Mongol Yuan. Vietnam possessed the financial means and military strength to wage an all-out war against the Mongols. At the very height of the Yuan dynasty's power, the Tran were ready to fight the Yuan a 4th time, had Kublai Khan not died so soon.
By the standards of the 13th century, the Tran dynasty was one of the wealthiest and most resilient states in Asia. The clearest proof is this. It fought 3 full-scale wars against the Mongol Yuan Empire and still managed to maintain its economic strength, public welfare, and military power. No other East Asian country at the time could be devastated 3 times and then immediately rebuilt, ready for a 4th invasion. That was only possible because the economy had real surplus, and the financial and logistics systems were extremely efficient. At the same time, the port of Van Don turned Dai Viet into a kind of mini southern Song, a bustling trade center where goods from China, Champa, and Siam all converged. The flow of money from maritime trade powered a very dynamic financial system, which allowed the Tran court to invest heavily in national defense, building warships, training soldiers, and maintaining networks of alliances and tributary relations in the region. Thanks to that, 13th century Dai Viet was not just a country that knew how to defend itself. It was a regional middle power of Southeast Asia, wealthy, influential, and confident enough to stand up to the strongest empire in the world at the time.
When the Tran grew weak, Ho Chi Li seized the moment, took the throne, and founded the Ho dynasty. Then the Ming horsemen swept through Dai Viet. Once more, the nation sank into a darkness of sorrow and loss. They seized innocent people as slaves. They plundered. They burned treasured books. They stripped the land and carried its riches north. Women were reduced to objects of sexual violence. Every trace of a once brilliant Vietnamese civilization destroyed. And it was the common folk who suffered hunger, dispersal, and the humiliation of oppression. Out of that darkness rose a peerless hero, the leader of the Lam Son uprising, who won back the nation's independence. It was a battle waged from weakness against strength, the few against the many. Through countless trials, a Vietnamese hero at last achieved what had seemed impossible. Independence returned to Vietnam. After driving out the Ming, the later Li dynasty inherited and restored the radiant legacy of the Li Tran age. Building a state of stable politics, a growing economy, and a flourishing culture. The king ordered a wave of new architectural works to rise across the realm. Not only that, it was a renaissance of Vietnamese culture. Under the later Lei, market days linked craft villages to river and road. Farm produce remained the chief goods at local fairs. Not only farming thrived, crafts flourished too. Pottery throwing. Skilled artisans were honored and entrusted with great works. Woodwork and weaving all grew in strength. Textiles of Dai Viet rose to become some of the region's most prized goods. It boasted exceptional quality and a distinctive artistic style. These handmade goods flowed toward Quechua, where foreign merchants gathered to trade. With the later Lei's open diplomacy, Chudao ceramics of Dai Viet reached the wider world. Exported far and wide, merchants poured into the country like festival crowds, opening shops and exchanging goods with the locals. For international merchants, trade in Dai Viet grew irresistibly attractive, but also for the preferential terms extended by the local authorities. In the later Lei era, trade pushed beyond the borders, reaching China, Japan, and even Europe. At this moment, Dai Viet was a booming port, rivaling what Singapore would become in the century to follow. Building on imported firearms and gunpowder, Vietnamese artisans forged the Jiao Chi gun, a weapon counted among the most advanced in the world at that time. Amid the Lei Trung Hung restoration, matchlocks standardized, great guns cast, Dai Viet entered the Trinh Nguyen Civil War, an age when firepower and fortified lines decided the field. In this era, a Vietnamese military genius emerged. He defeated the Qing armies at the very height of the Qing dynasty's power.
The Trinh Nguyen era of civil war is a really unusual case in pre-modern world history. Normally, civil wars drain a country's strength, like in 17th century England or Japan's Sengoku period. But in Dai Viet, something almost paradoxical happened. War actually became a driver of development. From a political and economic perspective, competition is the engine of progress, while monopoly easily leads to stagnation. Because the Trinh in the north and the Nguyen in the south existed side by side with relatively balanced power, both sides were under constant pressure to reform and innovate just to survive. To sustain a long, drawn-out conflict, they needed long-term sources of funding. So trade, production, land reclamation, and commerce were all pushed to expand. Dang Nguyen took advantage of its large population, fertile farmland, and tight administrative system, while Dang Trong focused on opening new lands and trading with Japan, Siam, and Western merchants. So even though they were bitter rivals, both sides, unintentionally, were pulling the overall economy of Dai Viet forward.
In the early Nguyen era, the king placed great weight on shipbuilding. Dai Viet even possessed what was then advanced warships. But it was eventually shelved for lack of funds. Meanwhile, the free spread of Western missionary activity in Annam stirred the court's fear of foreign invasion. At that moment, the Nguyen court sealed the ports and shut the country's doors. External trade froze. Life grew harder for the people. Catholics were persecuted. Corrupt officials ran rampant. Uprisings flared across the land. Resentment filled the hearts of the people, and thus ended the last dynasty of Vietnam's feudal age.
By the time of the Nguyen dynasty, Vietnam's historical chessboard had entered its final phase. So the Nguyen dynasty stayed in a defensive stance, steadfast but isolated. The Nguyen didn't fall because they were weak. They fell because they were playing by the old rules on a chessboard, where the game itself had changed. A tragedy that many Asian nations of the 19th century also had to face.